Mauro Dell'Amico, who is the project coordinator, will give a short introduction to the project. I think quite a lot of you will know about it already. I will give a short introduction to the background for this webinar and why we're having it. Then we will have a few interventions from different project partners. Riccardo Enei from Missinova will talk about the equity practices and social indicators from other activities that we started our work on. Then we have two presentations from public authorities. We have 4 public authorities in SINFONICA, and 2 of them will present today, and the others in future webinars. So this will be Lars Meyer from Noord-Brabant province in the Netherlands, and Matthew Shelton from Transport for West Midlands in the UK. Then Riccardo will come back with some recommendations for CCAM policy, and I will share that presentation a little bit with him by focusing more on the information part of CCAM policy. And then I will just advertise what is coming up. We will have 2 other webinars in the next 2 months, and we also have a major final event in Brussels that we would encourage you to consider registering for. So I will now pass the floor to our coordinator, Mauro Dell'Amico from the University of Modena, Reggio Emilia, and let him give a few words of welcome and overview. Mauro, please.
Thank you, Andrew. Welcome everybody to this first webinar of our project SINFONICA. Today I will just give you a very short information about the project. The project was founded by the European Commission 3 years ago, and we started in 2022, and we are going to finish our activity at the end of August. SINFONICA first projects devoted to understand the social impact of the introduction of CCAM vehicles. I do not see the presentation. Andrew, are you?
Sorry. Yeah.
Showing it?
Okay. You should see it.
Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Okay. Okay. It is still here. Okay. Good. So what we have done in this 3 years is basically to collect a lot of information from people from different parts of Europe to understand what are their needs, their desires, and concerns related to the use of CCAM vehicles. The methodology that we have adopted is this one in several steps. We implemented a strong co-creation activity with the group of interest in 4 different countries. We have proposed and developed the methodology to understand the needs and desires of the people with these groups of interest. We have made with them several meetings and several discussions, but we have also collected information from other sources. Now, then we have collected all the information, we have analyzed them, and we have inserted the information and some analysis in some tools that are not the object of this webinar, but that are available from the project website. Today we are here in line with the activity of guidelines and recommendations, and we will give you some results about our analysis of information. In the next slide, you see the numbers of Project SINFONICA. We have made a lot of interviews, face-to-face interviews, more than 300 interviews, many focus groups and workshops in several countries, going from Greece to the United Kingdom. We have also used a questionnaire that was submitted to more than 4,000 people spread all over Europe. The result will be shown next from my colleagues here in the webinar.
Thank you very much, Mauro. So I'll dive into the webinar again. We come just to say these are the main elements of SINFONICA. There are other ones as well, but we had a task on shaping the strategy and stakeholder engagement strategies that Mauro introduced with a series of focus groups, interviews and co-creation. And this was also understanding the expectations and concerns and desires of people, very broad range of different kinds of users and non-users right across society in these 4 cities and regions that we have in the West Midlands in UK, North Brabant in the Netherlands, Tricholite in Greece and Hamburg in Germany. Because of people's availability, then this during the summer, this part of the strategy will be shown in the next webinar in August. And then this webinar here, so this middle part of the text, is about the strategies, methodologies and recommendations. So this is covering equity practices, limits and possibilities of CCAM solutions, policy and guidance on communication. This is part of the recommendations part of the project, the work package. And then another part of the recommendations of the work package is focusing more on implementation and also large-scale demonstration projects, maybe at national or European level, and this will come later in September. So we are one out of 3 here. We're this middle part. To go back to the agenda, so my colleagues will now take over from me and I will come back towards the end. I'll hand the floor over to Riccardo Enei from consultants Isinova in Rome, who has worked on a lot of the background on equity practices and social indicators, and I'll pass the floor to him. Riccardo, you can share your screen. I will stop.
Yeah, many thanks, Andrew. Now I share the screen. Okay, I hope you can see the screen now. Okay, good morning to everybody. I'm going to try.
You can put it in full screen mode, maybe, if you can.
Yeah, okay.
Great.
Okay, this will be better.
Very good.
Okay, good morning to everybody again. I try in 10 minutes to show you what we have done in terms of analysis of social indicators and a quick, but I hope satisfying review of legislation. The source for these activities has been basically the European project dealing with the CCAM. I am sure that everybody knows that there is an excellent knowledge base on the European project dealing with the CCAM, which is the knowledge base on connected and automated driving, CAD, which is available at the website Connect Automated Driving EU. And this is an excellent source in which you can find more than 300 projects dealing with automatic driving. And for everybody interested in what we are going to show you, please have a closer look to the SINFONICA deliverable 5.1 dealing with equity practices and social indicators. And coming to this source, one of the first problem that we had with this huge source of project is which criteria can be used for the selection of the project. We have used basically 4 criteria. The first one is that the project should deal with the autonomous buses. You know that SINFONICA project specifically deals with the shared autonomous buses CCAM, and therefore that should be the main object of the analysis. And preferably, the project analyzer should have no more than 10 years of project duration, so just should be finished in the past 20 years. The second criteria was the services should focus on the problems arising from the integration of a new automated service in the public transport network, because inclusivity, accessibility, and integration for people with mobility challenges is one of the topic of the project. So we try to identify the project dealing with this criteria. Another criteria was that the services should be analyzed in low demand areas, just to check the better usability and importance of this project. And the last criteria is that the project should also deal with the strategic and technical issues, issues concerned with all the topics addressing the development of CCAM in the long term, for example, integration with the SUMP and other topics, and also technical issues concerning the how the needs of people with challenges, mobility challenges, can be integrated in the services in terms of usability and accessibility. So, applying all these criteria, we come up with 40 European projects select. We have provided 4 clusters in which these projects have been classified. One cluster is a 9 CCAM project dealing with the strategical issues, governance, business model, accessibility, 7 projects dealing with the public transport domain, autonomous buses and shared services, 12 CCAM projects dealing with the acceptance of automatic vehicles, both on the technological and behavioral point of view, and finally 12 CCAM projects dealing with the implementation of new technological solutions. Now, coming to the results in terms of social equity. The first question, which aspect of social equity have been addressed in this sample project? You can see for the graph that acceptability and accessibility have been the most important topic addressed across all the project. I think this is understandable because CCAM services have been delivered in the past year. They can be considered new services, not yet reaching a full stage of market development. So it is understandable that at this stage, thematic addressing acceptability and accessibility are the most important ones. But we would like to stress, and we have stressed in the project, that affordability has really been downgrading, because only 10% of projects dealing with indicators concerning affordability. And affordability is probably one of the key topics which is of interest for people with mobility challenges, not only for people dealing with rural areas or with low income or with economic problems, but also people in general dealing with the services. So this evidence is important to stress, because it means that maybe in the next future research we may need additional projects dealing with the topic of affordability. And when we come to the second indicator, which type of users are most frequently addressed in this sample of project, you can see that older people and people with physical disability have been the most important one. Combining these 2 categories of users, we are about 50% of occurrences of analysis in the project. And you can see that all the other people with mobility challenges related to digitally vulnerable people or persons at risk of poverty or young people have been not really addressed in this project, in the sense that the share is very low, 4, 5, 7%. And this is consistent with what we said before, in the sense that given that affordability is not important so far, it's quite normal that there is a substantially not analysis fully including these people. And so this is, I think, two important topics to consider for the next research need. And coming to the second topic of the analysis, the legislation. You know that when we deal with the legislation, it is a tough topic. We have the project has benefit from the contribution of the partner, because the legislation in France, Germany, Greece, Italy, the Netherlands, and UK has been made thanks to the contribution of the partners in the project who provided documentation in original language. But in any case, for those interested in this very tough topic, please look at the deliverable 5.3. vision policy recommendation for user-centric CCAM, which will deal with the analysis. So let's come into in 3 minutes, I try to summarize. So the methodology is easy because we look at the documentation legislation and we identify 5 recurring topics on automated vehicle. The first one is safety and technical standards. I have to say that in this topic, there are legislation in France, les lois d'orientation de mobilité, and also in Germany, the Autonomous Vehicle Act, which have been moving in the direction of specifying safety and technical standards. But we also stress that there is a lack of reference when vulnerable group of users are involved. It would be better in the next legislation that this kind of people are specifically mentioned when we're talking about safety and technical standards. The other topic important in this kind of analysis is liability and insurance. Again, we have to say that there are interesting legislation in UK and Germany which try to develop a methodology for the liability and the insurance. But in Italy, for example, there is no specific liability for a regulatory framework for autonomous vehicle, and that could be a problem. So there is a lack of harmonized rules at EU level. Another topic is ethical and legal consideration. This is the very tough issues of how artificial intelligence can be included in this kind of services and how can people be accountable for that. Our review shows that only Germany is providing ethical guidelines for autonomous vehicles, but there is still a lot to do. Accessibility inclusion is another important topic, and we have to say that there are several legislation also at the EU level try to include accessibility for all, including people with mobility challenge and disability. But we have to say that it will be better to explicitly mention this kind of people when we talk about accessibility standard, which is not still the case. Concerning cybersecurity and data protection, EU legislation is progressing, but there are key challenges in terms of lack of harmonization. So, like to come into conclusion, again, it's very difficult because the topic is tough and you need to look at details. But in general, we can say that considering the sample of countries analyzed, there is the integration of autonomous services in national road code in terms of trials and demonstration according to national safety standards. And there is also a lot of funding in the sector. But we still need a more decisive step towards the inclusion, the consideration of vulnerable group of users. And we can say that this is still lacking in the EU legislation analyzed in the field. Okay, thanks for your attention. Sorry for my quick discussion on everything, but the topics are very tough. Still considering to look at the original sources for better understanding. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Riccardo. So this was very much the background and the legal side of that was ramping up towards the work that we did in this recommendations part of SINFONICA. If people have any questions or comments, please feel free to write them in the chat. I didn't see any yet. So we can move on to the next presenter. So we have 2 public authorities in this webinar. The first one is Lars Meijer from Noord-Brabant province, so in the southern part of the Netherlands, and he will, and both him and the speaker after will look at the policy approach in their region or province. So really, what is the use of a project like SINFONICA on the ground for a public authority? So Lars, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I have to share my screen, I believe.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Do you see the screen now?
Yeah, but I see the part where you see the following slide as well, not the normal diaporama. I think you need the bottom one.
Is it better now? Is this the good one?
Yeah, so you just need the diaporama part at the bottom, the icon at the bottom Right. Okay, it's shown like that. Strange. It's okay. We can see it. You can go on
Yeah?
with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Lars Meijer from the province of North-Brabant. Short introduction of the province, because yeah, I can imagine that not everyone knows where is the province of North-Brabant, because it's in the Netherlands. It's one of the 12 provinces of the Netherlands. It's located in the south, as Andrew already said. And we have 56 municipalities and 2.5 million inhabitants. And as you can see on the map on the right side, yeah, we have some big cities like Eindhoven, for example, and a lot of rural areas in the western part and in the eastern part. So yeah, that's also a reason why it's really interesting region to see how public transport works in our province. We are also well known from our Brainport region. That's the region around Eindhoven. It's all, I think decades ago it started with Philips, and now it's well known because of the ASML. It's also an economic corridor between the harbor of Rotterdam and to Germany, to the rural area, the Delta Rhine corridor. And it's also well known for its leisure. We have a lot of national parks in our province, but also a theme park called the Efteling is one of the best visited theme parks in Europe. And I will come back to that point, the Efteling, in the final slide of my presentation. We as province, we are public transport authority for our buses. We have 3 bus concessions in our province. All the trains who are running through our province are national services, was organized by the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. And we also have a paratransit transport that's organized by the municipalities. But since this year, we work together with the municipalities with a hub stop taxi, and it's called Bravo Flex. It's the flex taxi, and it's kind of on-demand services, especially for places where there's no public transport. And so in the rural areas, little villages, where people can book a taxi, and they will drive them to a bus station or train station. Well, why are we partner in this project? Because yeah, we also have an innovation program that's called Smart Ways, and that's a collaboration between the provinces of North-Brabant and Limburg. That's the most southern province in the Netherlands. And they also work together with our Ministry of Infrastructure. And one of the innovations they work on is CCAM. Well, and this project is focusing on the policy, on the accessibility of CCAM services, especially for vulnerable target groups. So that was also the combination, like the innovation program of Smart Ways and the public transport team of the province. So yeah, and we work together with one of our bus operators in the province, like Arriva. They're also one of the partners in this project. So that's the reason why we became partner in this project. Well, as Mauro already told you in the beginning of this webinar, we held organized some focus groups, interviews, workshops, and all the 4 groups of interest. They interviewed the 5 same target groups, but each groups of interest choose 2 or 3 other vulnerable target groups to interview them, and there are more based on our region, like province. Because we chose especially for people in rural areas, as you can see, because as I already said, we have some big cities, but also rural parts in our province. So there are a lot of people living in small villages where there's less access to public transport. So it's really interesting to how they see autonomous public transport being part of our public transport system, and could they use it still. We have chosen for migrants because they are not really used to our Dutch public transport system. In every country, it's a little bit different. Of course, the public transport system, and there's also a language barrier most of the times for the migrants. And the third one we chose was the single parent families. Most of the time, single parent families, they're not. It's not really easy for them financial way, but in the end, if we are critical about ourselves, then we think that this target group was not the right way to choose, because most of the time single parent families are always it was not the best way to do. So we have organized a lot of focus groups, 3 workshops together with stakeholders, 80 interviews with the target groups, and from all the interviews there were analyzed by the universities, the university departments in our project, and there were some policy recommendations for us. So here on this slide you can see the policy recommendations who came up from our interviews and focus groups. And of course, because there is no, when there are autonomous buses, there is no bus driver anymore. So the need for travel assistance is very clear. And that's one of the things people recommend to organize for us. So that's something that we would like to organize together with our public transport operators. Of course, it has to meet the accessibility requirements of the public transport we already have, like, for example, accessibility for wheelchairs, or some features for people with for blind people, for example. Now, the good information provision is also still important, because if there is no steward or bus driver at a bus station, you still want to inform well how you could travel by bus or by public transport to your destination. People find it also really important that there are safe and comfortable seats inside the bus. They feel a little bit unsafe, maybe because when there's no bus driver in the bus, so they would like to have some, for example, seat belts in the bus, because that gives them more the feeling of that they're safe in the bus. And also the digital booking system must be simple, because especially for digital illiterate people, but also people with problems with the language, or for them it's really important that the digital booking system, or the booking planners, that they are really simple to use. So that everyone can use those planners and booking systems without any help of a bus driver or a service employee of the operators. Well, those are the 5 most important policy recommendations from our side, and we want to implement them, of course. Because we can implement them already in our current concessions, also in the buses with a driver, but also in the future concessions when there is no driver. So one of the most important things for us is that at big bus stations, that each bus line has a fixed bus platform, because nowadays we see at some bus stations in our province that bus lines has no dedicated bus platform. So it's really hard for people, especially with visual impairments, that they cannot see where the bus stops. So that's really important. That's something that we would like to fix. Also, we would like to organize some information kiosks at the bus stations, especially with some audio description capabilities, because there is no bus driver anymore on the bus, so you cannot ask the bus driver for any help for your routes or something like that, or are there some kind of cancellations of buses. So it's really important that they could help, that the bus operator can help people via, for example, information kiosks, so you can book and plan your trip on this kiosks, but you can also use a kind of help button in case you need some help, of course, so that you can stay in contact with a service employee of the bus operator. Well, the third policy recommendation we'd like to implement is the development of an app for a bus to stop. Well, nowadays you have to press a stop button in the bus when you would like to stop at the next bus stop. But for some people with some blind people, but also people who are not really well known on the bus route, they are not sure how when they have to press the button. So there are already some apps, but we would like to develop an app that you could say on beforehand. So I would like to stop at that bus stop. The driver or the bus system sees in his in his board computer sees, okay, I have to stop at that bus stop, and it's more easy to travel by bus. And of course, the working facilities in buses. Nowadays, of course, in our concessions, it's already required that a bus has a wheelchair ramp, but also like a stop announcement system. That's nowadays already required in our concessions, and we want to still have those features, facilities also in our future concessions, but also like when buses became driverless, then it's also really important that the stop announcement system always work, and that the wheelchair ramp come out of the bus by itself, and not that someone, some passenger needs to help someone in a wheelchair. So those implementations, we would like to implement them in the upcoming years in our public transport system in Noord-Brabant. And we start also after this summer with an autonomous shuttle at the Efteling, the theme park I told you before. That's for us a really interesting pilot site, because it's a theme park where a lot of families are visiting this theme park for sometimes for a weekend or for a few days, and we would like that people. We would like to stimulate the public transport, that people come more by public transport to this theme park, and that people can also try and use our autonomous shuttle. So as you can see on the right picture, you can see the route. It starts at the number 1, that's our bus station, bus stop from theme park, and it will go to number 6, that's the main entrance of the theme park, and the other numbers are holiday parks or hotels where people could stay if they visit the theme park for more than 1 day. So we expect that a lot of vulnerable users will use the shuttle. So that's also really interesting for us, that we can see that everything we already tested or analyzed, that we could test it in real life. So that's for us a really interesting pilot site. We do that together with Arriva. Arriva is also a partner in this project, so it's a good collaboration between us after this project. So that's what I would like to tell you, and if there are some questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars. I don't see any questions here. Of course, if people have questions later, you can write them in the chat or even email us. We have a contact at the end.
Yep.
And so I now go on to the second of the 2 public authorities that will feature today. So we go from the Netherlands to the UK. Matthew, I don't know if you are available, but Matthew Shelton from Transport for West Midlands in England, so the metropolitan region centred on Birmingham, and he'll give the perspective of his public authority.
Thank you, Andrew, and good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll share my slides now then.
Yeah.
Okay, is that coming up how it should? Yes. Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Matthew Shelton. I am the Future Transport Services and Technology Lead at Transport for West Midlands. And just a little bit about the West Midlands. So Transport for West Midlands is the public transport executive arm of the West Midlands Combined Authority. So these combined authorities are a relatively new invention in the UK. WMCA has been together for just around 9 years or so. It's kind of a regional level administration, and it looks after 7 boroughs. When I say looks after, it looks after some elements of the 7 boroughs. So on the map there, you may see we've got, if we start in the middle, the large purple region, that's Birmingham. That's the 2nd city of the UK. Moving to the east, we've got Solihull, which is a mainly rural, but also has quite a lot of industry and the airport. JLR have a big plant there, and Coventry as well is kind of the easternmost point of the region, which has a very strong automotive history. Moving to the west, we've got the 4 boroughs there, which make up the Black Country. The Black Country is a very strong industrial heritage. In fact, the whole region was a very strong industrial region for a long time until kind of the mid 20th century. So, as mentioned, it's mainly urban. There's very little rural areas. The only rural areas is probably the southern part of Solihull. Besides that, you're looking at very high density urban areas in most of the regions. It's a region that has kind of been looking for a new way of adapting. So as mentioned, there's a large automotive history that a lot of those industries kind of went away. And the West Midlands has been trying to refocus its efforts on what it should do. And what has come out of this is a new perspective on the automotive sector, and a focus on connected and automated and coordinated mobility. So there's quite a strong ecosystem developing in the West Midlands now. With the public transport we have both regional and national operators of trains. So there's plenty of routes into London, Manchester, Glasgow, Edinburgh, but there's also a regional operator which services all the commuter stations in the region. There's a really comprehensive bus service. So I think bus is probably the #1 public transport mode in the West Midlands, and there is a aspiration to have a bus stop everybody in the West Midlands to be at 600 metres away from the nearest bus stop. Some of that is not achievable because of the rural area, as mentioned before, but most of it, because it isn't a highly built up urban area, does have that quota met. I've put the metro on there. The metro is the tram. So it's kind of like a high-speed tram that kind of at the moment services the west of the region, going from Wolverhampton into Birmingham through Sandwell, and it is currently extending out towards Dudley as well. And there's also the airport, so Birmingham Airport, which quite conveniently is based in Solihull. Moving on, why is the West Midlands involved? So the West Midlands, as mentioned, very strong automotive history, looking at how we find our place in the new world, and that has been kind of focusing on CCAM. So with that, we have a number of academic institutions in the region who are really strong around automation, and we've been working with them on developing things like Midlands Future Mobility, which is a real-world test bed, and that goes through a live environment using live roads, but also using established test beds like Hariba Myra and also some of WMG. WMG is Warwick Manufacturing Group, which is the kind of industrial arm of the University of Warwick. So we've been developing projects now within CCAM for around 7 or 8 years. Some of these are feasibility studies, some of these are a little R&D projects. They're all very technical projects, and what we found is that while the technical aspect seems to be strongly supported, there hasn't been much support given to how the public will adopt to it and what the acceptance levels are. And that's something that we find quite important, because and we're fully aware of examples in the UK where a mode has been introduced without consultation, and it has not had the take up that has been expected. So we wanted to make sure that we were consulting early, discussing with the residents in the region what their concerns are, what their issues are, and how we can address those and give them a little peace of mind with some of the projects that we're working on. So SINFONICA was a really good lead into that, of working with the residents of the West Midlands to find out what their concerns were, what we needed to do to bridge the gap between their perspective and where the technology is. And also, as a public transport executive, we'd be able then to advise operators on what is going to work in the region. I'm going to move on now. And so similar to Lars from the North Brabant, we also had our vulnerable groups. So the West Midlands focused on people with physical disabilities and people on low income. So we conducted the focus groups and workshops with stakeholders. We interviewed 80 people in the West Midlands. We also had a focus on what we class as digitally vulnerable. Now, these are people who either by choice or by budget do not engage with smartphones or the internet. And those people can be quite difficult to reach, but we wanted them to include them in the work that we're doing. So we use our bus stations to kind of find people who didn't have a smartphone or access to the internet, and kind of interviewed them there in the bus station, took them inside, gave them a cup of tea and some biscuits, and they're quite happy to talk to us. We also interviewed, we also surveyed around 520 people in the region as well. So the recommendations from the West Midlands were, I think there's a lot of disparity about some of the wording of automation and connected. I think the CCAM it's a bit of an unknown term, and in the UK we're trying to establish that the autonomy we're talking about is not the kind of the cruise control in the vehicles or the ALKS system or anything like that. We are talking about fully independent vehicles operating at level 4 or higher, and we understood that some of the language used around this needed to be addressed. And in fact, at the moment in the UK, there is a consultation which is open around addressing some of the marketing terms for these vehicles. So this kind of policy recommendation seems to have been maybe influenced, possibly, but it's definitely something being looked into in the UK at the moment. What we also found out was that automation, I don't think at this point in time we are looking for automated buses to be replacing existing traditional buses. I don't think the infrastructure is there. I don't think the sort of public acceptance is there. So we need to focus on it as more a part of a multimodal toolbox. And what we found is that there's certain use cases for it around large campus areas. So I've mentioned on my earlier slide something called the NEC. The NEC is the National Exhibition Centre. So it's a very large exhibition centre in Solihull next to the airport. It has restaurants, it has shops, it has a arena for music, and it's all on a pretty private site. So for a site like that, it's ideal because a traditional bus service may not be as useful there as kind of an autonomous shuttle. However, replacing high volume buses on a long arterial route, we know that the technology is not quite there yet, but that doesn't mean that it won't be in the future. The third point we've got is around safety and the perception of safety, and we found that critical. So whilst a lot of the people we spoke to were concerned about safety, it wasn't actually the vehicle, it was more the safety on board. So currently with traveling by bus, you've got a bus driver who adds a veneer of safety of somebody being on the bus, an authority figure. When you're taking that person out, you're essentially leaving people alone with strangers. How do we make them feel safe? How do we use preventative measures rather than reactive measures. How do we kind of influence behaviour on this? So I think there's a lot of work to be done in this area, and this is going to be a really interesting. I know it's quite key for vulnerable users and especially women. And that sort of brings us on to the accessibility point. So one of our vulnerable groups was people with physical disabilities. We need to ensure that the design of these vehicles is not leaving anybody out. We know at the moment that with traditional bus services, if there's more than 2 wheelchair users, that a third wheelchair user will have to wait for the next bus because there just isn't the capacity for that. We have to figure out how the curbside works with this as well, and how people can be secured on the vehicle, especially when there is no safety driver or driver. If they're left on their own, how do they secure themselves in the vehicle? And the final point we've got here is around the consistent pricing. So there is a fear amongst people that with the introduction of a service like this, it could be seen as the introduction of almost a 2-tier public transport. So traditional bus may stay the same price, but for a higher price, you could use an autonomous shuttle, and essentially you created a 2-tier system. What we need to address is the price point of this, and I think one of the key things again is around looking at how the vehicles, the costing point at the moment against traditional services, it's not quite there. I think we'll see that drop as we see the sort of tipping point addressed. But at the moment, that pricing needs to be consistent with other transport modes. Otherwise, it's just not going to be acceptable for the users. So finally, and like Lars and North Brabant, I just wanted to introduce a trial that we've got ongoing in the West Midlands. So I mentioned the National Exhibition Centre. This is project scale. So we've got those 3 shuttles, which are Omeo lift shuttles. So some people may be aware of Omeo. They operate around Europe, a lot of European airports. What we're doing with this project is connecting the NEC, which you may see on the map at the bottom there, to Birmingham Business Park, which is right at the top. Birmingham Business Park has around 10,000 employees every day, but it has no public transport access at the moment. There's a lot of car parking, but what we want to do is give an alternative to driving. So at the NEC, you may see, it's a very small map, I appreciate that. You may see that there's a natural rail station there as well. So by connecting those 2 sites, we are giving a public transport alternative. Also, the site, as mentioned, it's very large for users to get around the site. It's not always the most friendly to pedestrians, and you may have to kind of cross unlevel paths, unlevel roads, and where there's no pavements and things like that. So by introducing a service like this, it's allowing people to move around the site freely. This is ongoing until the end of this year. May possibly be extended longer, we're not sure yet. But it's a precursor to the ITS World Congress. So that is being held at this site in 2027. We're looking at having an operational service ready for that event. And this is giving us lots of learning on that. So with that, I think that's my last slide. Yep. I'll stop sharing there and I'll hand back to Andrew. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Matthew. Excellent, okay. Really interesting. Maybe I'll come on to some of the recommendations later as well. But this is all leading into what the project is coming out with in the end, and real world applications in cities and regions, rather than just academic work. So now there's There are two parts of recommendations covering, firstly, rules and regulations, market-based instruments and infrastructure development that Ricardo will present. And then I will finish with recommendations on information and awareness quite briefly. So I would like to hand the floor back to Ricardo for his second presentation from Isinova in Italy, for those who missed him at the beginning. And yeah, you can share your screen if you can.
Many thanks, Andrew. I share the screen. Okay. Yeah, can you see the screen?
Yeah, if you can make it
okay, perfect.
Full screen or big.
Yeah, I try to.
Yeah. We can see it anyway, so you can.
Okay, that's better.
Yes, good.
Okay, as Andrew said, I am going now to summarize the policy recommendation concerning three, basically, policy domains, rules and regulation, market-based instrument, and infrastructure provision. As I told you before concerning the social indicators on CCAM, for those of you interested in having a closer look to the analysis, please look at the SINFONICA deliverable 5.3 on vision policy recommendation for user-centric CCAM. And first, before going into the details, maybe I think it's important to give you a methodological background about how we proceed. I'm sure that most of you listening to this webinar are familiar with transport policy. And therefore, I'm sure that you feel confident with this classification, which can be considered standard classification when we deal with the political tools in transport policy. The four categories are classified in this way. Rules and regulation is concerned with the command and control measures. Decrees, laws, and regulatory framework that are be considered in the analysis. And when we talk to market-based instrument, now we are talking with economic instrument like subsidy, taxes, research and development grants. Infrastructure provision concerned with the supply side measures involving actions in terms of infrastructure integration, urban planning and development. And then, last but not least, information and awareness that can be considered soft measures in which you don't need big funding or infrastructure provision or specific rules and regulation. Okay, this is the framework we have used for deriving a recommendation. And now I'm going to show you what we found in the specific categories. We start with the rules and regulation. Which kind of recommendation can be drawn? First of all, common EU standard on safety. This is an important topic for rules and regulation. And maybe you remember when we discussed about social indicators, there is a need for harmonized European standard on safety in order to have a smooth implementation of CCAM services, specifically for people with challenges, mobility challenges. Another important topic of rules and regulation concerning liability. Regulation should clarify liability in case of accidents. This is a hot topic, not only for the standard users, but specifically it is felt as an important topic for people with mobility challenges. And then there is also important the need to provide recommendation in terms of standards for privacy and data protection. You know that the CCAM services may rely heavily on digital data, and so there is the need for data protection and also security in order to avoid that data are manipulated and can be led to dangerous services. And now let me stress the permits for operators. I think if you remember the presentation from North Brabant, stressed that for an operator point of view, it's important to have a smooth regulation in terms of a permit to operate, conditions for providing the services for people with mobility challenges that could be able to meet accessibility criteria. This is an important area of rules and regulation, and our hope is that they will be considered in the next analysis. And coming to the next category, policy category, market-based instrument. What can be done in this area? Talking about the economic instrument, we concluded that CCAM needs incentive subsidies and specifically grants and research and development support, because the market segment is a high technical oriented, and research and development are necessary, but also incentive and subsidy, because the service is new and may need economic support in order before having the take up in terms of market development. Another important tools in this kind of policy domain is the developing of public-private partnership in order to find out the right balance between the private contributor and the policy side, the operator side. Behind CCAM services, there are a lot of digital services, digital supplier. So spin-off and flexible way of providing services may be the case in this kind of services. And then the pricing strategies. This is what West Midland stressed in the presentation. CCAM services prices must be competitive compared to alternatives, also considering different users' willingness to pay. So this is an important topic that must be considered. Coming to the infrastructure provision, another important domain for policy tools. We have identified three subcategories for this group of policies: digital infrastructure, physical infrastructure, and planning and coordination. Altogether, they can provide the right infrastructure development for people with mobility challenges. Talking to the digital infrastructure, it is important to have this kind of segment developed, specifically considering need for people with mobility challenges. Digital tools must be accessible for everyone, and it is important to develop these tools taking into account needs of this specific category of user. The same for physical infrastructure. This is a big problem. Accessibility must be made available for everyone, and in particular, when we talk about people with mobility challenges, existing physical infrastructure must be adapted to their needs. So it is an important topic. And then planning and coordination. This is the policy category, which may include also the important role for local stakeholders, who we'll see later on in the final slides. But we need a coordination in terms of infrastructure provision between the national and local level at a regional or urban scale. And now let's come into to have a summary overall view on policy recommendation. We tried to indicate apart the type of policy tool, what the content, also who and when. And when we talk about who type of stakeholders is going to be involved in the implementation of these policies, we have make the distinction between international, EU, national and local stakeholders. And when we talk about the time horizon, longer, short term, it is important to specify what we mean with the longer and short term. The approach has been the one similar when we talk about economic modeling, in which the short term usually between 1 and 5 years, while the longer term is anything else over 5 years of time horizon. So we have adopted this structure. Okay, starting with the rules and regulation. Concerning the what, we have already discussed the content of this policy domain: safety and liability standards, privacy data protection, and ethical issues. We're going to take on board to implement this kind of recommendation. Probably policymakers at EU and national level. This is a topic in which a local policymaker probably cannot have the final word. And in terms of time horizon, we think that looking at what is happening now in terms of harmonized standard at EU level, I think that our understanding is that it will be not an issue that can be solved in the next 2 or 3 years. It should be a longer-term issue because harmonize the rules addressing safety, liability, and privacy and ethical issues take a long time. Concerning another important component of the rules and regulation, vehicle design standard and infrastructure interoperability. Again, policymakers at EU and the national level, including transport operator and manufacturers, should be the target audience of this policy initiative. When we think that probably it is realistic to think that in the short term, because we know that there are a lot of things moving in this field of interest, there are design standard for vulnerable users, infrastructure interoperability that are going to be set up. So we think that in the short term, it will be possible to have to make a step forward in this direction. And concerning a public service obligation for vulnerable groups, we discussed before with the North Brabant, transport authorities and operators have obviously be involved in harmonized in association with standard EU and national standard. Again, we think that in the short term, this type of recommendation can be implemented because there are case studies, not at least the North Brabant experience on that, concerning a public service obligation for vulnerable groups. Coming to the market-based instrument, the contents have been discussed before. We are talking about incentive subsidies, memorandum of understanding and public-private partnership, and major funding in research and development. Who is going to be involved in terms of policy actor? Mainly EU national policy actor, but also local level and transport operator obviously must be included in this kind of tools, economic tools, when probably in the short term, because research and development programs funded by the EU are underway. There are a lot of resources allocated in the next framework programs, and public-private partnerships are undergoing in specific good practices. And so we think that in terms of recommendations, this can be done in the short term. Concerning the other component of the economic tools, the sustainable business models, that should be involved basically operators because they have the feeling of how much a CCAM service may cost to the users and also to the community, to the public finances. We don't think that despite there are best practices, maybe it is a matter of a longer term horizon to have a good answers to this topic. So it may take time. Probably it is an indication for future research need that we need to fund the project in which sustainable business model have designed, are tested before part of a full market. And coming to the last category, infrastructure provision, very important one. In terms of accessibility, integration in urban network and planning and coordination, including a sustainable urban mobility plan and national strategies, this is a topic which needs the involvement of a wide, broad policymakers from local to national and EU, including vulnerable groups of users. This is an important topic in terms of policy inclusion because if we want to have services that are inclusive for all, we need to include representative of a vulnerable group of people in the design and in the policy setting of the solution. We cannot afford to have a top-down solution that then don't find the agreement from the users. Maybe it is we can, in order to address, to discuss this topic, you know that there are a lot of charging station for private vehicle in our urban areas. But I know that the initial design of this charging station were not suitable for people with wheelchairs. And I know that in some cases there has been a lot of money for upgrading the chargers infrastructure of vehicle to people with disabled, in particular with people with wheelchairs. So I think we should not make the same error. So the next services should involve the users in order to save money, avoiding costly updating, and also to be more suitable for them. And I think in the short term, we can address this topic. And concerning the setup of digital infrastructure, which is important, and maybe thanks to the need to be harmonized to solve several problems, maybe the longer term will be most viable. But it's a matter of political willingness to move forward. The strong is it. And probably the short is the time frame to effective solution. Okay, thank you. And again, question here.
Thank you very much, Riccardo. So if there are no comments or questions yet, then maybe I can continue with the last part. So this is the final part on recommendations for information and awareness. This is part of a project report, a deliverable that is under finalization at the moment. So there'll be more very soon at the end of the project that you can delve into. So looking at what is coming out of the 4 public authority areas, or what we call groups of interest in this project, one of the first thing is user involvement in the design. Of course, users can't design everything, but there have been focus groups in this and other projects on design features that need to be not only on vehicles but also on the infrastructure at the stops, information provision, anything that is online or physical information, software design, payment systems, and so on. At the bottom of each point, I've mentioned the kinds of organizations that would be responsible for these. So in this case, manufacturers and public authorities. This is all pre-service information and communication with users and the general public. Whether they're actually a user or not, awareness is an important thing. As Matthew mentioned, for West Midlands, the just talking about connected or automated vehicles can raise some negative perceptions. The point of this is to really say what are the benefits and where will they be used. It's not a case of changing every bus service into a driverless bus service, but instead of an opportunity to create new and different services that are in addition to the services that exist and at a lower cost, and maybe also dealing with things like driver shortages, and also maybe not just getting rid of people, but redeploying staff in a different way, so they're not sitting behind a steering wheel all the time, but instead they are out helping people who need assistance, and then they're closer to the traveling public. Active participation as well, meetings with citizens to obtain their feedback on needs and concerns, especially if something is being planned or different options are being looked at. So we have to involve people at the beginning and not impose anything. So benefits, as I mentioned, not just talking about there's no driver, but also say what will be the additional benefits. What can there be efficiency and environmental impact? Maybe there will be staff but doing other things, and it's an opportunity to perhaps often CCAM or automated shuttles and things, they're looking at specific sites in towns, or business parks or this kind of places, airports and so on, or maybe leisure parks that are that were mentioned by Lars earlier in North Brabant region, Efteling. But another deployment opportunity is perhaps in the smaller towns and in semi-rural areas where there is a challenge of providing good public transport, where there is a shortage of staff, where there are low density populations and low numbers of trips to diverse places for diverse needs. And this is something where automated transport can help plug a gap and provide a better service to people. So you push it as providing something that wasn't there before and not cutting costs or making a worse service. And of course, openly addressing any fears, hesitations and concerns as well, especially regarding safety. And of course, as already mentioned by Matthew, in West Midlands, is not just safety of the vehicle, but also the personal security, or even the feeling of personal security, the feeling that you are maybe on a vehicle with other people that you don't know, and there's nobody in charge of it, or maybe there's somebody in charge of it but not driving. These are all the concerns that need to be looked at, not just the technology. Targeted communications are important to both to different population segments, but also different geographical areas, to convince those who are open to the idea and to show the benefits, and to market it as a convenient and integrated system. Integration into existing public transport is important as well, not to have anything that is two-tier or anything that is considered elitist, but something that is really seamless with the existing public transport and provides a feeder. Communication should also consider users that are not online, in users that might not even have a bank account, things like migrants or maybe some children who are old enough to use public transport on themselves but are not financially so independent. And in some cases, children going to and from school is considered a good use case because you have a fixed trip every day. And sometimes there have been, I think in the United States, some parents may be happier with the child being in a driverless hail and ride vehicle than alone in a vehicle driven by another person, by an adult. Consider that, we often consider that everybody is online. We're not. Of course, there are many elderly people, including people I know in my family, who are perfectly able to use public transport, who are physically able, but are not able really to use smartphones or internet anymore. The technology is either too confusing, or you have a vision problem and you can't see to use an app, or you can't figure it out. There needs to be another way of finding information, of booking and of paying. This is really important, not to exclude people. And even those of us who are online all the time and have smartphones, well, maybe sometimes we have a flat battery, sometimes we lose our phone, or some other problem happens, and you have to go back to maybe the more old-fashioned methods. Demonstrations and road tests, these have been done in lots of places in Europe and beyond. Very important to actually show people what connected and automated mobility is about. There a lot of myths and concerns may be expressed by people who have not actually been on an automated vehicle or a semi-automated vehicle or seen one. If they experience it and they see how it is, usually people are happier with it. This is what most trials have done in the past. Of course, most real demonstrations, especially in Europe at least, are using the small shuttle type vehicles that go at a very low speed, sometimes on a public road, but more often in a kind of controlled area. And when you in the future, this might be more larger vehicles on public roads with mixed traffic. Not immediately, but it is going to come. And this is important, just to have demonstrations to show people what can be done and to put them at ease. Training passengers, so not just training staff, but passengers with specific needs need to be familiar familiarised with the vehicle. I know this is not just a CCAM issue, even for traditional public transport. Usually operators have training sessions for example, blind or partially sighted people can be invited to find their way around a bus or a train or a tram and to explore what the features are, what they feel like, how to use it, how to get on or off or select their stop and so on. This is very important for passengers with specific needs to get them familiarized with the vehicle, and maybe on the more practical side, when you are using an automated or semi-automated vehicle, perhaps a standardization of the look and feel of the vehicle at least is also quite important for the user point of view, instead of having lots of different vehicle types with different layouts. Staff training, okay, I mentioned that. It is important to have trained staff, not just operating the vehicle or looking after any problem or emergency, but also staff with what we call soft skills, who are aware of different kinds of disabilities. Let's remember that most disabilities are not visible, so staff need to be equipped to offer support, reassurance to those who are less confident, even people without any kind of issue or disability who are maybe just unsure or not confident or first-time users. And these staff can be on board, they can be at stops, or they could maybe be on a virtual system, for example, a screen on the vehicle where they can answer any questions. This is really depending on the size of the vehicle, on the type of service, on the length of the service. And this is going to come out in a future webinar when we talk about recommendations for different kinds of services, because we're not going to impose the same rules on everything. It depends on the speed, the capacity, and lots of other things, what kinds of staff level you would have. Also, maybe at the inception of a service, you would probably need a lot more staff at the beginning of a service to familiarize people with it than once it has bedded in and become the norm and more accepted. Information provision, okay, a lot of the focus group work and interviews and so on has focused on different formats for information. So not just online information, but also all the normal stuff that you would have in public transport anyway, such as tactile signage, things for people who are hard of hearing, hard of seeing, maybe a language difficulty, or people who have difficulty reading large amounts of text, or maybe people unfamiliar with the service or the area. Assistance systems, so not just staff, but features of the vehicle that can be used perhaps automatically or by the users themselves. So yeah, earlier on for the West Midlands, Matthew mentioned wheelchair ramps. What happens if a vehicle is unmanned? Can a wheelchair user deploy a ramp if they need it? Other things like attachment systems and selecting your next stop and so on. One thing that we discussed is that a vehicle, even for somebody who is not intended to travel, because automated vehicles will have a lot of camera facilities on them, they can be safe areas for somebody who is threatened or feeling threatened in a public area, where they can seek refuge. I've seen in some cities you have a safe area with a camera where a button you can press and you're being monitored, and an assistance will come if, for example, you are in a threatened position by other people, and this could work as that kind of thing as well on a automated vehicle. So this is also about building trust and helping users feel safe, personal security, as well as actual transport safety. Emergencies, obviously there has to be a fail-safe system for any kind of emergency, especially if there isn't a person, member of staff on board. So there does need to be constant monitoring internally, and audio systems as well, with feedback from the user, so that it's not all one way. And yeah, there's been some talk about passenger identification technologies. We could say the jury is still out on that a little bit, because technologies can identify certain kinds of passengers, maybe somebody who has a wheelchair or a walking stick, or maybe somebody who is maybe a child or somebody with young children, that could be detected, and maybe certain systems can be deployed accordingly. But there are privacy concerns, and some people may not want to be identified by technology, especially as this all goes into the realms of AI, and people might say, well, I don't want to be identified as a wheelchair user. I want to be autonomous. Of course, even somebody in a wheelchair, there's a wide range of autonomy. Some are actually quite young and agile and can maneuver themselves very well, and other people need help. So even with one kind of disability, we have these different levels, and people may not want to be all painted with the same brush. So one solution is a kind of voluntary self-identification. If, for example, at a stop or on the vehicle, there is something to press to say, okay, I have a specific need. Maybe you could select what that kind of need is, and then the right systems could be deployed accordingly, or staff could be also brought to the vehicle if the person needs some help. That is the end of this little overview of recommendations. There will be more in upcoming webinars and the final event of this project. So this is number one in a series of 3 webinars that we are doing at the end of the SINFONICA project. The second one will be at the end of August. We are just deciding today whether it's the 22nd or 25th, but information will be on the project website. And this is really a lot more about the citizen engagement. So you heard that we had interviews, focus groups, and so on in the 4 cities and regions part of this project. This is a big deeper dive into how it was done, what lessons were learned, what was successful, and what the main feedback was. So this is interesting, I think, for anyone, not just in a CCAM project, but any researcher or indeed public authority looking at citizen engagement for any kind of topic. And then at the end, just after the end of the project, we'll have a 3rd webinar on the operation of transport. So not so much on the information that I've just talked about, but what the kinds of vehicles, the kinds of services, and what is needed for each kind of service, including recommendations for demonstration projects. And we did look at a lot of different demo projects around Europe already as part of this project to see what the typology was and what the lessons learned were. And that will come in the middle of September. Importantly, we do have our final event at the end of August. We have to have it in August because the project finishes at the end of August. So I know it's not always the most ideal time for everyone, but it is really in the last week of August, which is Thursday 28th. It's in the centre of Brussels in a large hotel, for those who know Brussels, called The Hotel. It will, of course, be free to come to. We would encourage people to register if they are interested in coming. The agenda and everything is on the SINFONICA website. Also, we do have a small pool of resources to fund travel expenses for those who need it, on the condition that they are part of our group of followers, which is a LinkedIn site, which is separate from the public SINFONICA website. So you can search SINFONICA group of followers if you're not already part of that. All the information for upcoming webinars and the final event is on the SINFONICA website there below, sinfonica.eu, and also on our LinkedIn page. I think that's probably how most of you found this event today as well. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, or you can engage with us online on the LinkedIn site or via the SINFONICA website. With that, I would like to stop sharing and end the webinar. I don't know if there are any final discussions. No, my colleague Miranda put the link for the final event if you wish to register. So please take a look at that. And yeah, 4 minutes early, I think we can now close the event if there's no other questions. So I'd like to thank very much the speakers, Riccardo Enei from Isinova, Mauro Dell'Amico from University of Modena and Reggio Emilia, who's a project coordinator, Lars Meyer from Nord Brabant Province, and Matthew Shelton from Transport for West Midlands. Also, my colleague Miranda Quijano, who has organised and set up this webinar. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you join the next one, and perhaps see some of you at the final event at the end of August. Thank you very much, and have a good summer.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. We'll end it.